Yes, but genetically, which is why people love, being outdoors and they're always happier there. They're not happier sitting in an office. But genetically, we are still gatherers and hunters. That doesn't mean that it's possible for us all to live that way today.
I don't think that Gary would ever be a hunter and gatherer. Gary, am I right in that?
Well, not really my cup of tea, no. But I would say that having had children that went to a Steiner school where they didn't push at the reading, writing thing in the early stages, but there was lots of artwork and things like that. And I have to say all the kids from that particular school, which was in West Auckland, have turned out to be very successful at reading, writing and creative. In fact, a lot of actors and writers. And so it seems to have worked for them. So I do have some sympathy for the philosophy, yeah.
All right, Joey, you keep going, Joey.
The more important element is that kids need to be able to form a deep connection with the natural world, because our modern way of living is utterly destroying the natural world, which actually we depend on for our own health and well-being, right? So if they don't form that bond and that connection while they're growing up, it'll likely never happen. And then they'll grow up, because if they're bonded to computer screens and they're bonded to corporate logos and they're bonded to walls, then that's what they place importance on. And so the devastation that's going on, here in Aotearoa, 99% of the kauri trees have been cut down. 90% of the wetlands have been destroyed.
Right. Joey Moncars, hey, all the best for the venture. That is the Deep Green Bush School. No tests, no homework as the school goes bush. I want to mention this one because this was interesting. We were going to talk about it yesterday, Alan and Gary, but there's been an ongoing spat, years in the making, in the sunny centre of Nelson. The St. Louis Stanton, also known as Hone Maheke, is freedom camping, as they call it, in the Nelson CBD, hanging up his undies to dry between the trees on the main drag. And it came to a head in the weekend with about 20 residents with placards at their wits' end wanting them to leave. Stanton supporters hurled water balloons from the rooftops. The next thing, it was all on. Arrests been made, including Stanton himself. So where's the line, Gary, between a local character and an eyesore? What do you make of this?
Well, the problem with this is that in Wellington, I know, for example, has had a couple of characters on its streets for years as well. I think one of them died last year or earlier this year. And so, for time after time, people would try and do something and remove characters off the streets. But I think any society is always going to have them. So I think all you can do in the spirit of Christian charity is try and help people like that to get better accommodation, perhaps help them to tidy up their sites and encourage them to practice things which will make them merge better with the community. But I don't think you can really just get rhythm. You certainly can't. I don't think you can frog march them out of town.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, Alan? Because I can recall people in Christchurch in the 70s and 80s, the square, you had the Bible lady, the Seagull man. So these are characters that do form a bit of culture colour, even though they can be annoying at times.
Indeed, and as long as they're not inconveniencing anybody, and I think that seems to be the problem in Nelson, that people are up in arms with, that he's, sort of camping out the front and stuff like that, of businesses, so I don't know. You
have been a great panel. Gary McCormick, thank you.
Thank you. Enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Alan Blackburn, thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much, Wallace. Thank you, Gary.
And I'll see you next time on the panel.
Kia ora everyone. Tonight, the tiny settlement of Goose Bay, south of Kaikoura, is under urgent evacuation due to the threat of a landslide. We'll have the latest and two very different descriptions of what's going on. A Scargill resident at the epicentre of last night's 5.7 magnitude aftershock describes it as like a train coming through his house. Hope springs in Kaikoura, literally how mysterious bubbles have risen from the seabed and could be the area's newest tourist attraction if any tourist can get in. And we join Encounter Kaikoura's search for dolphins for the first time since last week's Quake. We find 300 and we jump in with the magic pictures if you're able to watch. If you're listening on the radio, we have lots for you after the news at 5.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon, ko Katrina Batten tēnei. 35 homes are being urgently evacuated at Goose Bay, just south of Kaikoura, in case a creek dammed by quake debris behind the settlement breaches. Residents were called together at 2:30 this afternoon by Civil Defence and the police and told they had 2 hours to evacuate and it would be at least 10 days before they're allowed back. The police and the Rural Fire Brigade are helping move people either south by road or Army 4-wheel drive or north to Kaikoura by helicopter. Liz Marnie, who runs the Goose Bay motor camp with her husband John, is packing up the car to go to friends who aren't in the evacuation zone.
We knew this morning that they're probably the ones along the creek would have to be evacuated. But we're up on Kaikoura Road, which is up the top. You know, we've got the fire shed here for Civil Defence where we all went for the earthquake and tsunami. And we thought we were safe here, but no, apparently we're not. They want us all to go.
Liz Marnie of Goose Bay. A resident in the Scargill area of North Canterbury says it's like a bomb has gone off after yesterday's 5.7 earthquake damaged several homes. Bryn Davies says the quake sounded like a train was going through the room and there's extensive damage to his house. He says the community has rallied together offering support. In Wellington, the City Council has assumed control of the demolition of the quake-damaged office block at 61 Molesworth Street, citing public safety concerns. But the building's owner, Prime Property Group, says it's been given no explanation for the move. The empty 10-storey office block was undergoing renovation when the Kaikoura quake caused serious structural damage. Demolition was supposed to start on Monday, but preparations for that were completed only today. The council's building manager, Mike Scott, says the council has taken over the project to ensure the building is taken down in a way that ensures public safety and is done in a timely manner. The Insurance Council says a failure to comply with the earthquake rules around restraints for office equipment is a likely cause of commercial building damage in the capital. The restraints hold air conditioning, fire sprinkler, communication, electricity systems, lighting and ceiling support systems. The Insurance Council's Chief Executive, Tim Grafton, says the structures pose risk to life and property.
These structures, we believe, are non-compliant in many parts of New Zealand because there is insufficient inspection and monitoring of compliance with guidelines.
Tim Grafton says there's little or no monitoring of non-structural elements in buildings, and the Insurance Council has previously made 2 unsuccessful submissions to Parliament seeking a law change. The Ethnic Communities Minister, Paseta Sam Lotuinga, is welcoming the move by the Federation of Islamic Associations to stand down the Imam at the centre of hate speech allegations. Sheikh Mohammed Anwar Sahib has been permanently stood down from his executive role on one of the Federation's committees after making anti-Semitic and sexist speeches at a South Auckland mosque. Mr Lotuinga says he believes that's the right thing to do. Dr Sahib retains his role as the president of the Al Taqwa Mosque in Manukau. The New Zealand Jewish Council says that is a worry. The company supplying concrete for the sealing of the Pike River mine has pulled out of the project because of the opposition to the work. Solid Energy has started work to seal the mine, a move which has angered some of the families of the 29 men who died in the tragedy and whose remains have not been recovered. Allied Concrete has been supplying concrete to a company which has the contract to seal the mine. The chief executive of H.W. Richardson, which owns Allied Concrete, Brent Esler, says they were contacted by some of the families.
When we became aware of the emotional upheaval, I guess, with families involved in the tragedy and the impact that closure was going to have on them, we sort of considered our situation, and as a family-owned business, very sympathetic of the families and the tragedy they've been through.
Brent Esler says Solid Energy is also dealing with a difficult situation. Temperatures have been reaching record levels across eastern New Zealand today as high pressure and a warm air mass combine to create sweltering conditions. NIWA forecaster Chris Randolino says it's cooking in Hawke's Bay.
It's hot, baby. Warm stuff. Wairoa, as of 2 o'clock, 34.1 degrees. That's their warmest temperature since 1971 at that particular location.
Chris Brandolino says 34.1 degrees is the hottest November temperature for the entire country in the past 15 years. Gisborne was at 32.2 degrees at 2 o'clock this afternoon, nearing its November record. It's 5 past 5. To sport, and the strongest ever lineup will compete at Auckland's ASB Tennis Classic following the completion of the field today. Danish world number 19 Caroline Wozniacki and former French Open champion Serbian Ana Ivanovic are joining the Williams sisters Serena and Venus for the January tournament. The director Carl Budge says the tournament, just 2 weeks before the first Grand Slam of the year, the Australian Open, is becoming ever more popular.
These players are known by their first name anywhere in the world. Any of the continents you go to, they're genuine superstars.
Carl Budge. The South African captain, Faf du Plessis, says he's been made a scapegoat by World Cricket's governing body, the ICC. Du Plessis, who's been found guilty of ball tampering, insists he did nothing wrong when shining the ball with saliva while sucking on a mint during the second test against Australia in Hobart last week. Du Plessis was fined his entire match fee.
For me, if you talk about ball tampering, that is something that's wrong. It's picking the ball, it's scratching the ball. Shining the ball is something that I think all cricketers would say is not in that same space.
South African cricket is considering an appeal. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, we're on the bandwagon with jazzman Kevin Clark, who's just written a book about his life as a professional musician, playing for weddings or parties or anything. Sonia Sly meets the designer who's made the leap from heavy construction to women's wear. And this week's overseas correspondent, Peggy Ravel, is on the line from Canada, where they are gearing up for the Trump refugees, if his ideas don't get there first. On Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow for the entire North Island, also Nelson and Marlborough, fine apart from areas of morning and evening cloud, mainly in the west of the North Island. Northwesterlies strong and exposed parts of Wellington and Wairarapa until tonight. Canterbury, cloud increasing today and patchy drizzle developing tonight, clearing inland tomorrow afternoon. Bulla, mostly cloudy with patchy drizzle, clearing tomorrow morning. Westland, cloudy with rain, possibly heavy south of Hokitika, rain easing tomorrow morning, then clearing in the afternoon. Southland and Otago, cloudy with rain becoming persistent this afternoon, rain easing tomorrow morning and becoming confined to coastal Otago in the afternoon with fine spells increasing elsewhere. Fiordland, rain with some heavy falls easing tomorrow afternoon. The Chatham Islands fine, cloudy periods tomorrow. It's 5:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks, Katrina. We begin tonight in the tiny community of Goose Bay on State Highway 1, just south of Kaikoura. A short time ago, an urgent precautionary evacuation order was issued, asking the residents of the 35 homes in the township to leave immediately. At issue, a dam caused by the continued seismic activity in the region. I quote, geotechnical engineers informed Kaikoura Civil Defence that given the size of the dam and the forecast bad weather, there was a risk it could breach. The dam appears to have been caused by debris that's fallen into the creek or stream during 9 days of earthquakes. All of this is breaking news. And we've just received two strikingly different descriptions of the dam and the extent of the threat it poses. Now, potentially in its path, if the dam bursts, is Moana Farm, very much in the heart of Goose Bay, owned by Paul Keung. At 4:45, we called Paul, who's hosting a team of marine experts working on the recovery of coastal fisheries, particularly paua, along the quake-damaged coastline.
And we've hosted the scientists and assisted MPI with transport and to allow everyone to work together to get a result to go and get into that coastal tidal zone and save the sea life.
So you've just come back from a meeting about this. You returned to your station in Goose Bay and there are civil defence people there saying what?
They said that there was a humongous slip that had caused a catastrophic dam that had enough water in it to wash out pretty much put in danger all the residents in Goose Bay. We immediately hopped in our helicopter, took our film crew, who just so happened to be here to film the paua recovery team, and went up and we found a tiny slip with a tiny dam with a tiny pool. And we came back to the civil defence team, showed them the video, and they were not interested at all, and they started to mock us.
Okay, this is odd. So the civil defence people are saying there is a very real and present danger. You have gone up in a chopper, you know the area, you live there, and you are saying, no, there's not.
It's on my farm, and there's not. Correct.
What the dam? So this is a dam caused by debris and stuff that has fallen since the earthquake of last Monday, right? 2 Mondays
Correct.
ago. Okay.
It's been there for 5 days.
And is there a life-threatening or property-threatening body of water backed up behind that?
No, it's the size of about 4 swimming pools.
And
it's about 1.5 metres deep.
Okay.
The machine right into the valley. They had a large jet ranger and they were way up in the sky, and they had a telescopic camera operating. We managed to fly into the valley itself and have a look, and we suggested to them that a team of 10 guys with some shovels could open up the side of it and it would be cleared in a couple of hours.
So you think evacuating Goose Bay is an overreaction?
It's a total overreaction, and then I was threatened with manslaughter. And I said, right, we'll pack up, we'll leave. And so what we've done, thank goodness, is our neighbouring farm has said, that's fine, we'll house all the pile recovery and all the scientists and all the efforts on the neighbouring farm at Boat Harbour.
So you said, we plan to stay. They said, if you do stay or prompt anyone to stay and something bad happens, there will be criminal charges.
Yes.
Can we go back to that body of water? Is it possible that even something that is 4 swimming pools high...
it's approximately 20 metres long.
Yeah.
And it's approximately 1.5 metres deep.
Okay.
Their reports were an incredibly... this is a creek. It's called a stream. It's not a river. And it is used to carrying a lot of water through it when it rains, because there's a very large and steep hill and mountain range in behind it. And I am blown away by what's been said.
And there's nothing else that you've missed? There's not something further upstream from there?
We flew the whole creek. I videoed the whole creek. There were 4 people in the helicopter. This is my farm. This is the land I've grown up on, and I've hunted every nook and cranny of it. And I certainly, at this point, with all the different parties involved, wouldn't be saying things like this, just for the sake of it. So, yes, this is completely ridiculous, but we've accepted it. We're packing up, and we're moving to the neighbouring farm, and thank goodness the operation can continue.
That's Paul Keung, who owns that farm. This is strikingly different from the version of events that Civil Defence put out in their media release and their precautionary evacuation advisory, asking people to go and go now. Murray Sinclair is the Civil Defence Controller. He's in Kaikoura. I spoke with him just before the 5 o'clock news. This is what he said.
This is caused by a dam that was discovered today by the geotech engineers that have blocked the stream coming down, and the area that's sort of covering it's the Kaikoura stream, and it's about 340 metres length of water that's been affected, and it's about 5 to 10 metres deep and 10 to 15 metres wide. So it's a significant amount of water that's building up behind there. So it's necessitated us to evacuate the property owners that are down there immediately.
We've just spoken to one of the property owners, Paul Keung, who owns the Moana farm there, and he's absolutely adamant it's not that big and it's not that bad and this is an overreaction. How sure are you about the real and present danger this dam poses?
The advice from the geotechs is this is an urgent precautionary evacuation. So I can only go on, I haven't seen it myself, but I do take the advice of the science experts on what we should be doing. The last thing we want to do is not evacuate and then be told, well, you were aware of it, we should have evacuated. So it is an urgent precautionary evacuation.
Right, yeah, and you can't win, can you? If you evacuate and you shouldn't, everyone grumbles. If you don't evacuate and you should have, then you're in real trouble. The issue,
exactly.
I guess,
our priority is always the safety of people first. So if it means a bit of inconvenience, we'd rather take that approach than leave them there and then put them in harm's way.
Okay, how long are they leaving for? There are 35 homes in this community. How long are they leaving for and where are they going?
At least 10 days they're out for, and then they'll get a better assessment. The other thing with this too is there's norwesterly weather coming through on Thursday and Friday, and that is where we get more adverse weather, rain coming through, so the levels of the water there behind that dam could build up further. And we are actually moving them either south out of Goose Bay, so there's Araro and up to all Kaikoura here as well. So we're looking at either options and basically saying, well, if you've got somewhere to go further south, go self-evacuate, quick get out of there, and we'll look after those in Kaikoura best we can when they need to come up this way.
10 days, Murray, that's a hell of a long time.
Yeah, I guess again, it is to make sure that we're fully over what happens to that water. So if that water dam bursts, then the risk is gone, and we'll know what damage is done to the dwellings, and people will be able to get back earlier, subject to no damage being done to the properties. But I'm going on the advice of the geotechnical engineers, and that's what we've got to stay with.
It's Murray Sinclair from Civil Defence. We will update the situation as we stay on air tonight. Last night, while we were still on air, we started receiving multiple reports of a large aftershock somewhere between Kaikoura and Christchurch. GeoNet immediately told us it was 5.7, located southeast of Kelvedon, about an hour and a bit north of Christchurch. People nearby were texting us to say they felt it, and it was nasty. The probable reason for that, a depth of only 7k. It was the tiny community of Scargill that felt it hardest, familiar with earthquakes after 2010, 11 and the shocks of the past week and a half. This was in a different league entirely there. Here's Scargill resident Bryn Davies.
Unlike absolutely anything that I've experienced before, John, it was apparently right under us here. It was like being hit by a train, although I've never experienced that. I've got a pretty good idea now what it must be like. And just nothing you could do about it. I was knocked to the ground originally, but when I stood up, my car, although it was in park, was trying to run me over, and my other old car that survived all the other earthquakes has fallen off the axle stands onto the ground. Absolutely terrifying. It's got at my nerves this time. I survived the other ones, but it got me this time.
Yeah, I can tell from looking at you, Bryn, and I'm so sorry you're so distressed, and we so appreciate you talking to us. I can see your car open, the boots open behind you. Is that where you went and slept because you were so terrified of the house falling on you, basically?
That's absolutely correct. I'm pleased to say I awoke to my phone ringing and the sun shining, so I must have had a bit of sleep in the early hours of the morning, so that was good. But I am tired now, and I'm pretty sure that I'll be having a pretty early one tonight.
Yeah, and so you've had all the other earthquakes. You were there for 2010, 2011, last Monday. You've had all of those earthquakes, and you felt nothing like this ever before.
Absolutely nothing like it before, because, as I said, this one apparently was right beneath us here in Scargill, and there was absolutely only a split second of warning as that train headed for my house. It wasn't like other ones where it rolled. I mean, the Kaikoura one earlier, I was still up for that at 3 minutes past midnight, and I managed to stand for 1 minute with the lights on and hold my two favourite pieces of furniture, but then the second minute was in total darkness. But it wasn't like this one. That was 2 minutes of rolling thunder. This was a bolt of lightning out of the blue. It's very hard to describe it.
Yeah, absolutely terrifying, because it is so unexpected and it is so brutal, and you feel so completely helpless. You talked about your two favourite pieces of furniture. Totally. How are those? How are your possessions? Have things survived intact inside your home?
Funnily enough, those two pieces that I was hanging on to in the Kaikoura earthquake actually stayed upright, and they were the only two pieces that did. A small story of irony is that I haven't had a television now for 30 years because I don't particularly like it, but because I'm due for retirement shortly, last Friday I bought myself a 40-inch smart telly, and it is no more because it hit the floor. So I think there's some irony in that somewhere.
It's Bryn Davies, who lives in Scargill. Further north in Kaikoura itself, frustrations are growing. All eyes are still on the inland route, which Civil Defence is struggling to keep open to emergency services. A Defence Force convoy going in there tomorrow. As Ian Telfer reports, water and fuel are running low in the township.
This afternoon, some good news for weary townsfolk. Another army supply trip.
Mr Mayor, if I can just sort of point out coming down the road now, you've got the convoys obviously coming down, and you'll see that there's the green tanks. Portaloos, the other one had green tanks on.
Kaikoura is like a beautiful tourist town in wartime. The racecourse has been turned into an army base and their trucks rumble all around. Water's limited, the sewage system doesn't work, and fuel's being tightly rationed. At the daily public civil defence meeting, Gary and Janine Smith asked again why they have to watch empty army trucks leaving every day while they're being stopped from driving out in a four-wheel drive.
Frustrated now, especially when we see opportunities go by. Yeah, simple solutions and opportunities missed.
So you would think what they could use those empty trucks to get you guys out?
To get us out or allow us to tuck in behind in their safe, organised convoy, which they are, they're professionals at it, and just let maybe a dozen suitable vehicles follow them out every time they go out. And by now we would have all been gone.
The Labour leader, Andrew Little, who's back today for another look at the town's recovery, said he'd talk to the government ministers to see what could be done. Mr Little says Labour's working closely with the government to help Kaikoura and had talks this morning about legislation to go to Parliament next week, fast-tracking emergency powers for the district. That would mean the vital South Bay Harbour, which is the town's launch pad for whale watching and dolphin boats, could be dredged quickly and block state highways cleared.
So if they're going to fix up the marina and get boats moving in and out, then they can't go through a 18-month consenting process. So it's giving local officials the power to make decisions to get stuff fixed and going and moving, because that's what's needed most now.
But in the town there are practical problems, and it seems to be a case of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. After 1 day of making showers available, Civil Defence says it's draining the water supply, so they've been halted for 2 days. 70% of houses have been inspected and white, yellow or red stickered. But fuel's in short supply at the town's 2 petrol stations and can only be bought using ration slips issued by Civil Defence. The owner of the Caltex, Sharon Neal, says they only have enough fuel until the weekend.
We've had a little bit of diesel, a few thousand litres of diesel, that's all we've had. BP have managed to they got some petrol in yesterday. I don't know how much. It wouldn't have been, it wasn't like a tanker load. It wasn't, 30,000 litres is what we normally get. It wouldn't have been that.
Locals getting fuel rations told us fuel's tight, but they're getting enough to keep moving.
We were very lucky because we had a full tank just after the earthquake, so we're just starting to run low now, so we're starting to panic a bit, yeah.
I've had to go and pick my daughter's cat up and take it to the vets, and it's just ongoing running around. It's just driving me nuts. Because I'm trying to save gas, but I've had to, because I've got a warrant that's due in 3 days, so I don't know if I'm going to get my tyres through, so I hope they understand for that.
Civil Defence says fuel should be okay now because the Army convoy today brought a bit more, and a tanker with 15,000 litres of petrol's on its way. In Kaikoura for Checkpoint, Ian Telfer.
Lots of feedback coming in on that Civil Defence decision to evacuate Goose Bay, and overwhelmingly people are saying if Civil Defence sees the risk, they have to respond to it. People from nearby are supporting the decision for the residents of Goose Bay to get out. Also some sense of confusion around why it has to be for 10 days, but Civil Defence being strongly backed by the feedback we're receiving. As the people in Kaikoura cope with absences, roads, tourists, incomes, services, you name it, something new has arrived in town, or just off it. Bubbles, an arresting eruption of them after from beneath the ocean floor, breaking the surface just south of the town, never seen before. They were first seen by Matt Foy, the owner of Kaikoura Kayaks, and more particularly by one of his guides, Connor Statley. More on that in a moment, but first Matt Foy on the business itself. In short, they are good to go, but they have no customers.
It's like someone's just turned off the tap, basically. So we've got no income. Our whole family survives off the income over summer to get us through winter. So we're looking at a double-edged sword here in town for our family and a lot of the other operators. A lot of us are probably going to have to bankroll this. We're sort of looking at putting, I guess, a lot of it on the mortgage and writing it out and, hopefully get these roads open and people start coming back to town. Everything's still here. Like, we've had a couple of runs around the peninsula. All the seals are out there. The boys saw some dolphins out there today. it's amazing weather at the moment. So, as far as we're concerned, we can operate, but we just don't have anyone in town to participate in the tour.
But Matt, so you've got all your normal stuff, and we understand there is something you can add to the experience which you've never had before. What's that?
Well, yeah, it seems we've got a type of spring phenomenon happening in Whalers Bay. We're calling it the Hope Springs for a few reasons. Hope for town, caused by the Hope Fault, and Connor's daughter, her name is Hope as well.
So who's Connor? He's your guide, is he?
Yeah, Connor. He started here a few weeks back. He's been involved with paddling for quite a few years. He's a pretty good whitewater paddler, and he loves this area. And he was chomping at the bit to get down here to start the season.
He's not nearby you, is he?
Yeah, hang on, mate. I'll pass you on.
Okay, thanks so much.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Mate.
Lovely to talk to you. All the best, Matt.
Cheers, John. Catch you later, mate.
Cheers, bro.
Hey, John, how you going?
Yeah, good. How are you going?
Yeah, damn good, actually. Really good.
And you've found something never seen before. So this is completely new as far as you're aware.
Yeah, it definitely wasn't there 2 weeks ago when I paddled around into that bay for the first time.
And so what did you see, Connor?
Well, Matt and I went out for a recreational paddle just to check our paddle routes, see what ones we could still use and what ones we're going to have to alter, and we paddled around into Whalers Bay, and we're sitting there for about 2 or 3 minutes, and I just noticed a boil coming up out of the ground, out of the water, and I was like, oh, what's that? Pointed it out to Matt, and then we paddled over, and then we realised how substantial it actually was and how far it actually went, and it was amazing. Just bubbles coming up out of the earth, just with a very strong sulphur smell.
And it's really bubbling, is it? You can really see it?
Yeah, you can see it from when you paddle into the bay, if you know where to look, from about 100 metres away.
And it smells like Rotorua, does it?
Yeah, it's got, once you get over top of the bubbles, it's got a very strong sulphur smell. And actually done a roll in my kayak yesterday just to get a bit of footage of it, and it definitely was like going underneath one of the natural hot springs in Rotorua. Not the warmth, but just the presence of sulphur in the water. And
wow, Connor. So when your tourists come back, when people come back, not only are they going to get all the wildlife and that beautiful scenery, but they're going to get something new and unique to the area, right?
Yeah, we're going to take them to see Hope Springs.
And it's called Hope, Matt told us, because, Hope Springs eternal, right? And that's the story of Kaikoura right now. But there's another reason too, isn't there?
Yeah, so back in 2007, I had my first daughter, and we got told she had chromosomal abnormalities, so we decided her name was going to be Hope, and we're going to hope for hope. And I thought it was very fitting for Kaikoura as well. We've got new hope for Kaikoura. We've got the Hope Fault, which it could be contributed by, the Hope Fault could contribute to why this is here. And I just thought it was a very fitting name.
Connor Statley talking about hope in Kaikoura in very many senses of that word. A Kaikoura tour operator out on the water for the first time since last week's quake has found a very large pot of dolphins, alleviating concerns that marine mammals may have been scared off. Remember, whales have been sighted. Well, Encounter Kaikoura located more than 300 dusky dolphins just south of Goose Bay. We were there before. After heading out on one of their smaller boats today, our reporter Sally Murphy and videographer Rebecca Parsons King joined them.
Encounter Kaikoura has been left high and dry, their large sightseeing boats unable to get into the water because of the raised seabed. Skipper Tracy Cooper says this is the longest the company's boats have been out of the water since it began in 1989.
It's been awesome to get back out on the water this morning, and the marine life is still all there, so it's just ready and waiting. We just need to get the roads open and get the tourists back, and we'll be back into full swing.
Cruising along the Kaikoura coastline south towards Goose Bay, all of a sudden a pod of over 300 dolphins appeared in the distance. Guide Rachel Wilkerson says seeing the dolphins jumping around was a huge relief.
It's normally our albatross encounter boat, so it was lucky we just wanted to come out and just have a look. No one's really been on the water, no one's really seen the dolphins yet. So I know there were some concerns about the dolphins having headed out. Maybe the sound of the earthquake would have triggered them to head and find a new spot for the summer, but as you can see from several hundred dolphins out here, that wasn't the case.
How did you feel when you first saw all of them?
Oh, it was pretty exciting. You haven't seen anything. I was a bit nervous coming out here just to find out what you're going to see and what the coast looks like, because we hadn't seen it except on the news for photos, but it's really exciting. Just definitely a relief to see all these guys here. And you see how happy they are. They're just jumping around.
Fiona Waddell from the UK has been working for the company for 3 years. It's fair to say she was pretty happy to see the dolphins she swims with every day.
It brought it all back to normality for me, really. The first time I saw them I had a little tear in my eye. But no, it was really nice to see that they're still doing well. All the calves are still there, because there was a bit of scare that a few of the pregnant females might have lost their calves with the shock.
Owner of Encounter Kaikoura, Dennis Berman, says they would usually have 3 boats doing 3 tours a day over the summer. But now it's unclear when they'll get back into the water.
Still not going to be operating for a while, but at least it gets the word out that, you know, the dolphins are still there and the weather's great. At the moment we just can't get out.
Mr Berman says insurance is covering staff wages and the government package has been a help. But this summer they'll probably only run at 25% of their full capacity.
Got a lot of people working on what can be done at the marina, and which is really, really helpful. And everybody has a determination to get things happening as soon as possible, but we still don't have any definite timelines.
Like every other business, Encounter Kaikoura is hoping for the roads to be opened as soon as possible so tourists can return. In Kaikoura for Checkpoint, Sally Murphy.
Coming up on Checkpoint, Allied Concrete, the company contracted to seal the Pike River mine, has pulled out of the job. Donald Trump backtracks on his plan to lock up former rival Hillary Clinton. The strongest ever field will assemble for the ASB Women's Tennis Classic in Auckland. We'll have more on that. We'd love to hear from you in any way you choose. Text 2101. Email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. Don't forget, of course, we are on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you for being with us, however you are joining us. It's 28 minutes to 6. Here's Katrina Batten with RNZ headlines.
The owner of a farm at Goose Bay, which is being evacuated because of a dam caused by a quake slip behind the settlement, says the evacuation order is a total overreaction. Paul Keong of Moana Farm, speaking to Checkpoint, said Civil Defence told him the slip was humongous and the dam had enough water in it to wash out all of the residents. Mr Keong said he and his film crew immediately went up in a helicopter and found a tiny slip with a tiny dam and pool about the size of 4 swimming pools. He says Civil Defence was not interested at all in the film. A resident in the Scargill area of North Canterbury says it's like a bomb has gone off after yesterday's 5.7 quake damaged several homes. Bryn Davies says the quake sounded like a train was going through the room and there's extensive damage to his house. In Wellington, the City Council has assumed control of the demolition of the quake-damaged office block at 61 Molesworth Street, citing public safety concerns. The building's owner, Prime Property Group, says it's been given no explanation for the action. The Ethnic Communities Minister, Peseta Sam Lotuenga, is welcoming the move by the Federation of Islamic Associations to stand down the Imam at the centre of hate speech allegations. Sheikh Mohammed Anwar Sahib has permanently been stood down from his executive role on one of the Federation's committees after making anti-Semitic and sexist speeches at his South Auckland mosque. The company supplying concrete for the sealing of the Pike River mine has pulled out of the project because of the opposition to the work. Solid Energy has started work to seal the mine, a move that has angered some of the families of the 29 men who died in the tragedy and whose remains have not been recovered. And temperatures have been reaching record levels across eastern New Zealand today as high pressure and a warm air mass combine to create sweltering conditions. Those are the headlines. I'll be back at 6 o'clock.
Thanks very much, Katrina. Let's turn to business news now with our business editor, Giles Beckford, who is beaming in from Wellington. And Giles, the first sod turned at Mangawhai Heads today for a new trans-Pacific telecommunication cable.
Yes, this is the Hawaii cable. It's quite a significant piece of infrastructure, global infrastructure, or should we say Pacific infrastructure. It will bring considerable capacity, extra capacity to Australia, New Zealand, through Hawaii, up to the west coast of the States. The completion date is probably somewhere around 2018-19, and it's backed by some well-heeled individuals that will be known in the business market. That's Eon Edgar, veteran sharebroker from Dunedin, and Malcolm Dick, who's of course got a track record of being involved in telecommunications company facilities and operations. But there are also a couple of others that we've got that are in the pipeline that we don't really hear too much about. One of those is an extension or a duplication of the the Southern Pacific cable, Southern Cross cable, I should say. That's the one that's half owned by Spark. They're doing an extension between Australia and New Zealand. And then that would go up to the United States. And also there's another one called the Tasman Global Access, which is a cable across to Australia. That's backed by the big telecommunications companies, Spark, Vodafone and Telstra. And that would see us having extra capacity through to Asia. So all in all, from just having one cable that we've been relying upon, which has been the Southern Cross cable through to the States, we're now actually getting quite a spread of cables that will be choice for businesses, faster speeds, greater capacity, and possibly for consumers it may even mean better prices. And we'll have to wait and see on that one. Most of these will be completed within the next 2 to 3 years.
Thanks, Giles. A couple of company results today.
Yes, we're just coming to the end of the little splurge of 6 months results for companies that have had the September balance date. The ones that we had today were Arvida, which is the rest home company. They've got themselves a little extra, which is that they provide considerable levels of aged care health treatment. So they're looking after people with dementia and secure beds there. And that's proving to be quite a winner for them. Just been on the market, share market, a couple of years. $19 million profit for them. And Argosy, one of the smaller commercial property investors, they've got considerable office building investments around the Wellington region, and they had a healthy enough profit, $56 million. That, of course, does reflect the increase in property valuations. But still, all in all, it's been quite a good crop of 6 month results from the companies that have reported in the past 10 days or so.
Thanks, Charles. What happened on the markets today?
We had a stronger day on the share market, the top 50 index gaining 35 points to close at 68.51. The New Zealand dollar holding quite comfortably, quietly at around 70.6 euro cents and 95.1 Australian.
Thank you, Giles Beckford, our business editor. It is 23 minutes to 6. Some breaking news on Pike River. We will have that in a moment, but a company which was supplying concrete to seal the mine has pulled out of the job at the request of the families of some of the men who died in the explosion. Some of the families have been protesting Solid Energy's plan to permanently seal the mine, where the 29 men died, of course. They say the drift of the mine can be safely ended to check for evidence of what caused the explosion. Rachel Graham has more.
The chief executive of the company which owns Allied Concrete, Brent Esler, says they made the decision after being contacted by some of the families of the men who died.
When we became aware of the emotional upheaval, I guess, with families involved in the tragedy and the impact that closure was going to have on them, we sort of considered our situation, and as a family-owned business, very sympathetic of the families and the tragedy they've been through. I guess we've just taken the decision not to supply, hoping that in time sort of a resolution will be found.
He says he also has sympathy for Solid Energy, which is dealing with a situation it didn't create. Anna Osborne, the widow of Milton Osborne, who died in the mine, says she's ecstatic that Allied Concrete has shown it has a moral compass. She hopes other companies involved in the project to seal the mine follow suit.
I'd actually make a plea to those companies to think of the families who have been waiting 6 long years for some form of truth, some sort of justice, some form of answers, and until the drift has been re-entered, I don't think anybody should be doing any work up there. It's just morally wrong, it's inhumane.
The Environment Minister, Nick Smith, released a statement saying that Solid Energy had informed him that the first part of the work, to complete a permanent seal 30 metres down the drift, has now been completed, and the rest of the work programme would not be significantly impacted. Mr Smith says Solid Energy have advised him that ready-mix concrete was not essential to complete the seal of the mine, as the bulk of the seal is made of stopcrete. He said any further requests for comment should be directed to Solid Energy. Solid Energy have said they're not available for comment. Carl Barkley has been continuing a protest started by Sonia Rockhouse and Anna Osborne at the entry to the mine. Mr Barkley says he hopes the decision by Allied Concrete will encourage others to join the protest.
I want people here this afternoon, because there's guys up there at the moment pouring shotcrete to doors to stop people from getting in there, and I want them to get the word that they're not welcome back here tomorrow, and that they should bugger off and leave it for mine rescue to sort out what we need to do.
The permanent closure of the mine is expected to be completed by early next year. In Christchurch for Checkpoint, Rachel Graham.
We have here I'm on. We've been trying to talk to Solid Energy all this week. They decline all our invitations for an interview, but they put out a statement on behalf of their directors saying they are disappointed with Allied Concrete's decision. They say although there is already a seal on the mine, a thicker, stronger seal would further reduce the risk of an explosion. Solid Energy reiterated that although the concrete cap would technically be permanent, they claim it is reversible, and this has been discussed with the families. And in news just to hand, the lawyer who applied for a stay in sealing the Pike River mine has just found out that his request has been declined by WorkSafe. We spoke to Nigel Hampson QC a few minutes ago.
Have confirmed the improvement notices. That means the notices still stand, there's no stay of them, and they variously require one, the temporary seal to be improved by the end of this month, and secondly, the permanent seal sealing the actual mine to be in place by the end of February next year. Our next step, if my instructions are confirmed as from yesterday, and I'm waiting to hear back about that, is to take an appeal to the District Court on the basis that the decisions taken are unreasonable. That's the basic ground. And we'll be setting out an argument as to that unreasonableness from the family's perspective, both as to recovery of bodies and finding of forensic material, possibly in relation to the explosion itself. We still are waiting for a review of the decision to dismiss the charges against Peter Whittle. If they say we're reinstated, then for evidential purposes, access to that mine might be important still.
That's Nigel Hampton QC, who, just to confirm, in case you missed the beginning of that, our sound desk has decided to pack a bit of a sad, and so we're having a small issue with our audio, but basically the original application for a stay in sealing the Pike River mine has been declined. Nigel Hampton QC, on behalf of the families, is now going to appeal that decision. Speaking of decisions, one by the Federation of Islamic Associations to cut all ties with a controversial cleric for making anti-Semitic and sexist speeches has got the thumbs up from community groups, ethnic organisations and political figures. This is, of course, up here in Auckland. Sheikh Dr. Muhammad Anwar Sahib made the comments while preaching at the Al-Taqwa Mosque in Manukau earlier this month, where he still remains president. Anusha Bradley reports on this.
The Federation of Islamic Associations says Sheikh Sahib has been permanently stood down from his committee role, effective immediately. The president of the Federation, Hazim Arafeh, says it made the move because it does not agree with any of his comments.
We do have a thorough consultation process through which we had to go through, and then FIANZ decided that it has to distance itself from any anti-Semitic or hate speeches.
The spokesperson for the Islamic Women's Council, Anjum Rahman, says it's the right thing to do.
We need to be clear about the kind of comments that are acceptable and unacceptable, so I'm glad that FIANZ has taken decisive action.
The Ethnic Communities Minister, Peseta Sam Lotuenga, who yesterday labelled Sheikh Sahib's comments offensive and insulting, agrees. He says hate speech should not be tolerated, and ordinary New Zealanders have written to him, thanking him for taking a stand on the issue. However, a spokesperson for the New Zealand Jewish Council, David Cuman, says it's concerning that Sheikh Sahib is still able to preach.
Comments from the Human Rights Commission, from Minister Lotuenga, from the ACT Party, from Winston Peters, from the Islamic Women's Council and from many others, we're very grateful for those messages of support to stand up against Sheikh Sahib, and the step that FIANZ has taken is a good one. It's still concerning that he might still be able to influence people at his mosque, though, and I hope that he's watched closely.
RNZ News met with the Imam at his Manukau Mosque this afternoon and spoke with him at length. Sheikh Sahib says he does not wish to make any further comment at this stage. He says the statement he issued yesterday, in which he says his comments have been misinterpreted, clarifies his position. The Human Rights Commission says it's received 17 complaints about him and will mediate the dispute in each complaint. It says it will do the same for the 16 complaints it's received about the Destiny Church leader Brian Tamaki, who last week said gay people were to blame for the recent earthquakes. For Checkpoint, Anusha Bradley.
It's 5:45 on Checkpoint. Thank you for being with us. Just one district health board, just one, is meeting the government's faster cancer treatment target. The Cancer Society says the new official data shows more must be done to provide quicker cancer care to patients who are in serious need. Our health correspondent Karen Brown reports.
Cancer is one diagnosis many people fear, and those who get it understandably want timely access to tests and treatment. But just one district health board, Waitemata in Auckland, is meeting the target of providing first treatment within 62 days for 85% of patients with a high likelihood of cancer. The Cancer Society's medical director, Chris Jackson, says that will worry many patients.
Any kind of delay is agonising for them. And when they have their operations cancelled because of inadequate resourcing or when they are waiting for a scan result, that delay is just so distressing for patients, and they need and they deserve to have access to timely and speedy investigations and treatment.
Nationally, 78% of patients began cancer treatment within the target timeframe, up by 4% since the last quarter. Dr Jackson says it's a beginning, but it only covers the most urgent cancer patients. And while it varies between different cancers, there are hold-ups within the system.
We already know that patients are missing the target because they can't get access to their CT scans in time. The wait lists for CT are way too long. We know that every week patients are having their surgery cancelled because surgeons can't get access to theatre, and from time to time operations are cancelled because they can't get the support they need from the intensive care unit because of pressure on the resources.
The data shows considerable variation between large and small DHBs, from those near the top, like Wellington's Capital and Coast and the Waikato DHBs, to Hawke's Bay, Hutt Valley and West Coast, the latter trailing with 63% of patients treated within 62 days. Dr Jackson says the variability poses a challenge.
There's variability in the level of care that people are receiving around the country, and it shows that a lot of DHBs have got a long way to go.
The Health Ministry's Acting Chief Medical Officer and Cancer Program Leader Andrew Simpson says DHBs are doing well.
We've got 5 DHBs above 80%. We've got one that's achieved the target. This target's only been going just over 2 years, so it's tight. The DHBs are doing well, and we've got full confidence that they'll achieve 85%.
He says the ministry has put in both time and money to improving what's known as the patient pathway to treatment.
We've had the Cancer Nurse Coordinator Initiative, which has put in cancer nurse coordinators to help patients get through these pathways in a more timely manner and provide the support they need. We've had the regional cancer networks working with the DHBs. We've had National Forum to provide learnings from what one DHB has done to help influence another DHB.
But Labour's health spokesperson Annette King says it's clear not enough is being done.
I suspect you've got some DHBs that are struggling to recruit and retain some of their workforce. They don't have capacity. In my view, we ought to be sharing as much as possible all our capacity, particularly in an area as crucial as cancer.
Meanwhile, the target will become even tougher next year, with 90% of these patients seen within 62 days. For Checkpoint, Karen Brown.
Donald Trump coming up, but first, a commercial fisherman who caused the death of 39 albatrosses has been sentenced to 300 hours community work. Daniel Smith last month admitted a charge of failing to take the proper legal steps to prevent the deaths of the seabirds when he was catching tuna off the South Island's west coast in April. His lawyer says he's remorseful. The Ministry for Primary Industry says the offending was deliberate and selfish. Our reporter Tracy Neal was in the Nelson District Court today.
Fishing boats use what's called a streamer line to scare away birds attracted to their operations.
Daniel Smith says he didn't use one because they're difficult to deploy and he didn't want to endanger his boat or crew. Judge Tony Zorab says the Ministry for Primary Industries argues that wasn't just an oversight.
They characterise this as selfish, deliberate and repetitive feeding.
Smith has been a commercial fisherman for 15 years, and while he did deploy some mitigation measures during the April fishing trips, it wasn't enough. There was an observer on board who advised him many times he needed to use the streamer line. Judge Zorab said if he lacked training, he should have asked for help.
It might well have turned out to be a training issue, maybe that he wasn't putting them out properly and he hadn't been properly trained, but that could have been addressed rather than just saying, well, I'm not going to follow the law.
Judge Zorab said Smith's failure to comply with the law and international best practice guidelines had the potential to impact on New Zealand's credibility for having a sustainable fishery. MPI says the International Union for the Conservation of Nature ranks seabirds as the world's most threatened birds. MPI's Manager of Compliance Operations, Gary Orr, told RNZ News outside court why it was taking this case seriously.
New Zealand is a signatory to a number of international treaties around seabirds, and seabird mortality is the biggest cause of death amongst the bird population in the fishing industry. So we are committed, as is the Department of Conservation and the fishing industry, in reducing mortality in the fishing sector.
Judge Zorab said the offending was serious and carried a starting point of a $25,000 fine, discounted to almost $19,000 because of Smith's guilty plea. But because he has a history of not paying fines, Smith was instead sentenced to 300 hours of community work. Mr. Orr says MPI was satisfied with that sentence and thought it would be quite effective. But Forest and Bird disagrees. Its seabird advocate Karen Baird says she's shocked and surprised.
That basically comes down to less than 8 hours work for each albatross that was killed. It's pathetic, you know. It doesn't send a message about the seriousness of these, what are basically crimes at sea.
Ms. Baird says the owners of commercial fishing vessels also need to take responsibility for the behaviour of those operating their boats. In Nelson for Checkpoint, Tracy Neal.
8 minutes to 6, let's go to the US. His promise to lock her up ignited his supporters, but now Donald Trump is backtracking on his pledge to jail his Democratic rival Hillary Clinton, along with some other campaign pledges. The US President-elect entered what might be considered something of a lion's den today, holding an hour-long on-the-record meeting with editors of the New York Times. As well as dropping his promise to jail Mrs. Clinton, he expressed doubts about the value of torturing terrorist suspects, and pledged to have an open mind about climate change, something he's previously labelled a hoax. Here's the BBC's John Sopel.
The president-elect at the newspaper he hates above all others, repeatedly attacking it on social media, but which he gives more time to than everyone else, the New York Times. He was there to give their journalists an exclusive news conference, which they live tweeted, on one important U-turn. He confirmed there'd be no prosecution of Hillary Clinton over her use of a private email server.
We begin with breaking news.
First word of it came this morning.
The president-elect will not pursue any investigations into Hillary Clinton for her use of a private email server and the Clinton Foundation.
And later confirmed by his team.
You say a lot of things, even some bad things might happen, and then you can sort of put it behind you in order to unite the nation.
For month after month, Donald Trump supporters chanted "lock her up." He called Hillary Clinton corrupt, dishonest and a criminal.
We're going to get a special prosecutor,
and his promise to appoint a special prosecutor brought this feisty exchange at one of the presidential debates.
It's just awfully good that someone with the temperament of Donald Trump is not in charge of the law in our country.
Yeah, because you'd be in jail.
Secretary Clinton.
Some of his supporters on right-wing websites now complaining of broken promises. At the New York Times, other important statements. I think there is some connectivity, he says, between humans and climate change, a significant change of view. On his support from the far right, he said, it's not a group I want to energise, and if they are energised, I want to look into it and find out why. At the weekend, the so-called alt-right met very close to the White House to celebrate Donald Trump's victory, which they did with Nazi-style salutes. And instead of Heil Hitler, this.
Hail Trump! Hail our people! Hail victory!
Today at the White House, the outgoing president was giving Medal of Honor awards to some of the glitterati of American public life, many of them vocal supporters of Hillary Clinton during the campaign. The liberal elite who'll find themselves out in the cold under a Trump administration.
So BBC's John Sopel. Meanwhile, Team Trump is continuing the process of selecting a cabinet. In the latest development, former presidential candidate Ben Carson has been offered the post of Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. Mr Carson says he will consider that over the Thanksgiving holiday. Meanwhile, Britain has dismissed Donald Trump's unprecedented expression of support for Brexit campaigner Nigel Farage after he tweeted that many people would like to see him as Britain's ambassador to Washington. He would do a great job, Mr Trump said in his tweet. Prime Minister Theresa May was swift to reject such an undiplomatic proposal. It goes without saying that it's highly unusual for leaders to publicly suggest to foreign nations whom they'd like to see as an ambassador. Mr Trump's suggestion provoked anger, support, hilarity, you name it in Britain. One lawmaker even joked that perhaps Britain should suggest Hillary Clinton as its preferred choice for US ambassador to London. The time on Checkpoint is 5 minutes to 6. Thank you for being with us. We have plenty ahead in the program. And we're going to turn to some sport now. The strongest ever field will assemble for the ASB Women's Tennis Classic in Auckland in January, with 4 former world number ones present, including 22-time Grand Slam champion Serena Williams, 22 times. She'll be joined by big sister Venus, as well as Danish world number 19 Caroline Wozniacki, and former French and a former French Open winner. Between them, they have won 30 Grand Slams, 160 WTA titles, and spent 399 weeks, or nearly 8 years, at world number one. And as Matt Chatterton reports, they're not the only people that tennis fans should get excited about.
A little smile and a puff of relief. The third seed gets the job done.
Caroline Wozniacki is no stranger to Auckland. She's played here 3 times and was a finalist in 2015. She's just one of the 24 seeded players confirmed for next year's tournament who are inside the top 100 in the world. It's the strongest field ever assembled in Auckland, featuring some of the biggest names in sport ever to be held here in New Zealand. Tournament director Carl Budge says given the timing of the event, just 2 weeks before the first Grand Slam of the year, the Australian Open, players want to come to Auckland to get the best preparation.
These players are known by their first name anywhere in the world. Any of the continents you go to, they're genuine superstars. If we had one player in the top 100 at golf here, we'd be doing backflips. Well, we've got 34 of them coming in the top 100 and the 4 biggest names of the biggest women's sport on the planet.
There are 2 other tournaments that are played in the same week as the ASB Classic, one in Shenzhen, China, and one in Brisbane. In the past, these 2 have secured stronger fields than Auckland, but Budge says that's changing because of the reputation the ASB Classic is building.
Every single tournament would change their field for ours, which probably speaks volumes. Somewhere like Shenzhen's got 3 top 10 players that they've gone after. Brisbane's got some good depth. They've got Kerber, the world number 1, and a lot of those players rank sort of 10 through 20. They've got some really good depth, but I certainly wouldn't change my field for anything.
One name that is missing from the field is New Zealand number 1 Marina Irakovic. However, Budge says she'll be given a wild card so fans can see her in action in Auckland again. For Checkpoint, call Matt Chatterton Tine.
It's coming up to 2 minutes to 6. After the news at 6 o'clock, we have a really lovely story. This is about a man called Cam Booker, who decided that Kaikoura needs a farmers market. Now, he started a farmers market in Mount Pleasant in Christchurch. I think people who were there will know it very well. And he started it after the 2011 earthquake, the February earthquake, because, well, he just felt like people needed cheering up. And so he started it. He decided to start one in Kaikoura because, first of all, there are some farmers there with produce that they want to sell but can't get out to anyone because there is no transport out of the town. And also he felt like people would need some fresh stuff. So how did he get the produce in? Well, he took it in a convoy that included truck, overland walking and boat. So all of that and more coming up after 6. In fact, we will run the sting now and then I will give you the official breakdown of what we have ahead. was the unofficial tease, the ad-libbed informal tease. Now we have the formal and scripted one. And I think you'll suspect that there's not much difference. The tiny settlement of Goose Bay, south of Kaikoura, is under urgent evacuation. An advisory. They've been told to get out due to the threat of a landslide. We'll have the latest from our reporter Ian Telfer. He's in Kaikoura. Residents in the tiny settlement of Scargill talk about that 5.7 aftershock that hit them last night. It was very shallow and it was very near them and it hit them hard. All of that and more coming up after the pips and the news.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui, good evening, ko Katrina Batanaho. 35 properties have been evacuated in the community of Goose Bay, just south of Kaikoura, because of fears a dam created by a landslide on a creek will collapse. Residents were called together at 2:30 this afternoon by Civil Defence and the police and told they had 2 hours to evacuate and it would be at least 10 days before they're allowed back. But a man who owns a farm in the heart of Goose Bay, Paul Kyung, says the evacuation is a massive overreaction.
Took our film crew who just so happened to be here and went up and we found a tiny slit with a tiny dam with a tiny pool. We suggested to them that a team of 10 guys with some shovels could open up the side of it, cleared in a couple of hours. It's a total overreaction and then I was threatened with manslaughter.
Goose Bay farmer Paul Kyung. Kaikoura's Civil Defence Controller is defending the evacuation decision, saying their priority is keeping people safe. Murray Sinclair says it's a case of better safe than sorry.
The advice from the geotechs is this is an urgent precautionary evacuation. So I haven't seen it myself, but I do take the advice of the science expert. The last thing we want to do is not evacuate and then be told, well, you were aware of it, we should have evacuated. Civil
Defence Controller Murray Sinclair. A resident in the Scargill area of North Canterbury says it's like a bomb has gone off after yesterday's 5.7 earthquake damaged several homes. Bryn Davies has spent the day cleaning up his home with his son and his boss. He told Checkpoint's John Campbell the quake knocked him to the ground and there's extensive damage to his house.
Unlike absolutely anything that I've experienced before, John, it was apparently right under us here. It was like being... It was like being hit by a train, although I've never experienced that. I've got a pretty good idea now what it must be like.
Bryn Davies says the community has rallied together during the day, offering support and help. In Wellington, the City Council has assumed control of the demolition of the quake-damaged office block at 61 Molesworth Street, citing public safety concerns. But the building's owner, Prime Property Group, says it's been given no explanation for the move. Adam Bennett reports.
The empty 10-storey office block was undergoing renovation when the Kaikoura quake caused serious structural damage. Demolition was supposed to start on Monday, but preparations for that were completed only today. The council's buildings manager, Mike Scott, says the council has taken over the project to ensure the building is taken down in a way that ensures public safety and that it is done in a timely manner. Prime Property Group Chief Executive Ayal Aharoni says he's received no explanation from the council, but had been instructed by his solicitors and insurers to say as little as possible about the matter. This is Adam Bennett.
The Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment this afternoon confirmed it's investigating claims people were living in the building illegally. Olive and Ernest Mape said they'd been paying rent and living there with their 2 teenage children since June. The Insurance Council says a failure to comply with the earthquake rules around restraints for office equipment is a likely cause of commercial building damage in the capital. The restraints hold air conditioning, fire sprinkler, telecommunication, electricity systems, lighting and ceiling support systems. The Insurance Council's Chief Executive, Tim Grafton, says the structures pose risks to life and property. He says there's little or no monitoring of non-structural elements in buildings and the Council has made 2 unsuccessful submissions to Parliament seeking a law change. Solid Energy says it can't leave the Pike River mine partly sealed and will continue with the work despite a supplier walking away. The company says it has now completed the first stage of sealing off the mine. Rachel Graham reports.
Today, Allied Concrete confirmed it had stopped supplying concrete for the project after families of the 29 men who died in the mine asked it to. Anna Osborne, the widow of Milton Osborne, says she hopes other companies follow suit. She says until the drift has been re-entered and checked for evidence, nobody should be doing any work at the mine. However, Solid Energy says there's no way that the site can be left incompletely closed off. It says risk assessments have identified potential occurrences that the design of the seal addresses. In Christchurch, Rachel Graham.
The police have named the two men who died while tramping in the Tararua Forest Park during the weekend. They were Makalo Stepura, who was 39, and Pavel Pasniak, who was 32. The police say they were foreign nationals but had been living in New Zealand for some time. Mr Stepura was from Ukraine and Mr Pasniak from Belarus. The pair worked for Xero. The company says everyone is deeply saddened by the deaths and it's focused on supporting their families and other team members. The police say post-mortems have been completed and their investigation into the circumstances surrounding the deaths continues. It's 6:05. To sport, and the new All Black Sevens co-coach Scott Waldrum says the players can expect quite a difference under the new coaching regime. Waldrum and Tomasi Thama will look after the side until Clark Laidlaw takes over in June next year. Their squad for the first two rounds of the World Series was named today, and all but one of the players spent time under previous coach Sir Gordon Titchens, who led the side for 22 years. Waldrum says there'll be changes in the program and they hope to bring a fresh approach.
I think filling in for what Titch has done over the last 22 years, it's probably time for a change. So we're certainly looking to implement some new structures and some different systems and also try a few things and see if we can't get a bit of pride back in the black jersey by leading the world in the way we're playing rather than probably what it's been the last couple of years.
Scott Curry will again captain the men's side and Sarah Goss the women's side. Australia have named uncapped all-rounder Hilton Cartwright and thrown Glenn Maxwell a lifeline in a 14-strong squad for the three-match one-day international cricket series against New Zealand next month. Selectors have also recalled frontline pace bowlers Mitchell Starc and Josh Hazlewood after the pair were omitted from an under-strength squad, trounced 5-0 on their tour of South Africa. And Caroline Wozniacki and Ana Ivanovic have joined the Williams sisters in the field for January's ASB Tennis Classic in Auckland. That's the news.
Not enough people.
Where they find them from is going to be a challenge, I think, simply because the sector is already stretched.
The wrong people.
If people are coming here not to sign up to our values, our system of government, our understanding about human rights, then yes, I am unhappy.
Meeting the enemy.
Donald Trump went into this meeting complaining himself on Twitter that the New York Times had adopted a nasty tone towards him.
Across the spectrum, Morning Report, weekdays from 6. Then on 9 to noon, how Britain might seek a transitional Brexit deal to stop firms going over a cliff edge when the UK leaves the EU. And after 10, documentary maker Rick Fenley on the history of Sydney's gay bashings and killings. Join me, Catherine Ryan, on 9 to noon after Morning Report on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow for the entire North Island, also Nelson and Marlborough. Fine apart from areas of morning and evening cloud, mainly in the west of the North Island. Northwesterlies strong in exposed parts of Wellington and Wairarapa until tonight. Canterbury, cloud increasing today and patchy drizzle developing tonight, clearing inland tomorrow afternoon. Buller, mostly cloudy with patchy drizzle, clearing tomorrow morning. Westland, cloudy with rain, possibly heavy south of Hokitika. Rain easing tomorrow morning, then clearing in the afternoon. Southland and Otago, cloudy with rain becoming persistent this afternoon. Rain easing tomorrow morning and becoming confined to coastal Otago in the afternoon, with fine spells increasing elsewhere. Fiordland, rain with some heavy falls easing tomorrow afternoon. The Chatham Islands, fine, cloudy periods tomorrow. It's 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks, Katrina. Residents of Goose Bay, just south of Kaikoura, might not be allowed back in their homes for 10 days after they were ordered to evacuate this afternoon. The evacuation was prompted by the risk of a creek breaching above the settlement. Now, what's happened here is that debris has fallen into the creek, created a makeshift dam, a temporary dam that may burst at any stage. Really conflicting reports about the extent of the risk. Our reporter Ian Telfer is in Kaikoura and is joining us now via live view on what looks like an absolutely beautiful evening, Ian. What can you tell us about what's happening in Goose Bay?
Yes, John, it is a beautiful evening, isn't it? And yet Kaikoura itself is a bit like a war zone. But
Down at Goose Bay, we've really got the sharp end now, don't we? We've got the impact of that dam you were talking about and a possible collapse, and Civil Defence suddenly deciding they needed to evacuate 35 houses, including some holiday houses, and they needed to get them out right away. So they've given them 2 hours. They called a meeting at 2:30 this afternoon, called all the residents in and said, you've got 2 hours to evacuate. They need to choose whether they're going to come here to Kaikoura or they need to go south by road and get themselves out with friends or with family and go somewhere else for, as you said, up to 10 days. So an extraordinary development, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and really conflicting points of view about the risk. We spoke to Paul Keong, who's a farm owner there, who says it's not nearly as bad as Civil Defence say. Civil Defence, of course, say, you know, we have to err on the side of caution. You can absolutely understand that. Can you describe what it's like in Kaikoura? Because for people who are listening, Ian is having to squint. The sun is so bright. It is blue in the most magnificent way. The water looks calm. And in fact, it looks like a wonderful place to be. We can hear helicopters. What's going on in the town at the moment?
You're quite right, John. It is, in its own way, a paradise, isn't it? People come here for that reason. And the dolphins are out there, the whales are out there, and yet the town itself, so many of the buildings are damaged or need to be closed, but mainly the water and the infrastructure, the sewerage is out. And all of those kinds of things are the things that are hampering life here. We can't have showers, we got portaloos in the main street, we've got all the basics have fallen apart because of that quake 9 days ago. And people are just trying to work out how to live. At Goose Bay, I guess they're now discovering what the impact is, even 9 days later.
Our reporter Ian Telfer live from Kaikoura. Beautiful evening there. As we were on air at almost exactly this time last night, a strong aftershock measuring 5.7 struck near Kelvedon. That's about an hour and a bit north of Christchurch. The shallow quake was felt hardest in a really tiny community called Scargill. Residents there told our producer Bridget Burke the sharp, loud jolt sounded like a train and felt more violent than last week's 7.8.
The wire one was like being on a jigger swing. Where this one was just loud and then just a sudden violent jolt, and then it just, like a wee machine gun after that, just shaking the hell out of you. It was violent. It was horrific. I just yelled at my dog to get out. The dog bolted out the door and I was in hot pursuit behind. It was very, very frightening.
It's like a giant just sort of grabbing the house off the foundations and just shaking both ways, really. And before your eyes, I mean, you know, I had the TV that I was watching flew out of the cabinet. I had a huge big feature mirror above my fireplace on the floor. The mess, just everything. All the doors opened and the crockery on the floor, and that's no exaggeration. It's just...
And in the big earthquake, we'd lost 2 jam jars, but this time we've had a chimney basically collapse and a water tank listing quite severely, and kitchens basically self-destructed for plates and glasses, etc., etc.
I rang my neighbour and he came across to support me because my husband's away at the moment. He's cut his trip short. He's on his way home now. Quick decisions were made, and I went and checked our farm dogs to make sure they were all right. Took the pet dog with me, and then we came over to Stu's place, and then we decided that we'd go across to check on other neighbours. Then we all rallied at Blue Lewis's place, Blue and Pat's, and that's where I ended up staying the night. I slept in our Toyota Hilux. Wasn't the best place to sleep, but I wasn't going back into our house.
I've got a clock that my great-uncle won. He was killed on the landing day in Gallipoli, but that in the first quake that moved 2 inches, but in this one it was on the floor within seconds. I mean, and it's a very, very heavy clock. It weighs a ton. My son's grinder is in the garage, and it's a very, very heavy piece of machinery. It's on the floor. I've got an old hay shed there it's just so... Nobody should ever walk into it. It's so precariously propped up, and it survives. I mean, it's just unbelievable. and yet you'd have a nice brick-clad house and it's condemned,
The residents of Scargill talking to our producer Bridget Burke. Earlier in the program we brought you the story of Encounter Kaikoura, who went out on the water for the first time today since the quake and found a pod of 300 dolphins. Our camerawoman Rebecca Parsons-King jumped in and swam with them and filmed them. It's beautiful. But how have other wildlife fared, and what's it like for animals when an earthquake hits? Well, here's our Changing World's Alison Balance to tell us more.
As the land tore and the mountains began to fall, the noise was horrendous. It would have been even louder and more terrifying in the sea.
The earthquake that caused the tsunami off Japan was audible off the coast of Alaska, 900 miles away.
Professor Liz Sluton from the University of Otago says there are not many sperm whales at Kaikoura at this time of year, and the whales that were present would have probably swum away very quickly.
Certainly sperm whales and also beaked whales, which are also found off Kaikoura, don't like loud noise at all. So this noise would have seemed to have come from everywhere because the earthquakes that caused the noise would be so widespread. So it must have been a pretty scary experience for them.
Wherever they went to, the whales and the dusky dolphins have already returned. And the Kaikoura Whale Watch boat that reported seeing Jonah and other sperm whales earlier this week also saw plentiful seabirds. Gary Melville drives boats for Albatross Encounter, taking tourists out to see pelagic seabirds such as albatrosses and giant petrels. He says the birds are just at Kaikoura to feed, not to breed.
They're sort of here today and gone tomorrow. Sometimes they'll stick around 2, sometimes 3 days, not very often though. And then it can be months before they come back this way again. So, yeah, I don't think it was any threat at all to our deep-sea birds. I'm sure they probably might not even have noticed.
Liz Sluton says she's anxiously awaiting any news of the 2 small Hector's dolphin populations.
They are so localised that if they run away from a noise, they're very quickly into unfamiliar territory, places where there might be large sharks. For a sperm whale, for them to move a few tens of kilometres or even hundreds of kilometres is nothing for a sperm whale. That's all in a day's work. But for a Hector's dolphin, that's a long distance. So, yeah, they're the ones I'm the most worried about.
Thousands of New Zealand fur seals breed along the Kaikoura coast. And although a large rockfall landed on part of the well-known Oho Point Seal Sanctuary, Department of Conservation Ranger Mike Morrissey says that the timing of the earthquake was a lucky break for them.
Fortunately, only a few females have actually given birth yet, so the majority of the females and a lot of the males are still out at sea just building up condition and feeding, so they haven't come ashore yet. So there might be a few hundred seals that got buried in the rubble, but had it been another month's time, you would have been looking at thousands. So in some ways we've been very fortunate.
Mike Morrissey doesn't think the large slip at Oho Point will have much of an impact on the seals.
They may try and breed on the rock and rubble that's come down, or probably more than likely they'll just move to adjacent areas along the coast where there's no big slips.
Mike Morrissey says that the red-billed gull colonies on the rocky reefs of the Kaikoura Peninsula and the little penguins that breed in burrows at the back of the shore there were incubating eggs or guarding small chicks. They had a lucky escape from the tsunami. It struck at low tide and generated a wave that didn't run up any higher than the spring high tide mark. Unfortunately, the news is not so good for the Hutton shearwaters. These resourceful little seabirds breed high in the mountains, 20 kilometres inland and several thousand metres above sea level. There are 2 Hutton shearwater colonies. The largest one up the Pike River is home to about 100,000 pairs of birds, which breed in burrows in amongst the tussocks. Mike Morrissey has flown over the colony and says the enormous rock slides are an impressive but depressing sight.
Some of those slips are up to 70, 80 metres high that have gone into the valley. It's hard to estimate how much of the valley has been destroyed where the birds are, but it'd probably be pretty close to 20%.
The second, smaller Hutton shearwater colony is at Shearwater Stream on Nicky MacArthur's farm.
Doc had a flight that went over yesterday and they had a close look and they're thinking 30% or more. It couldn't have been the worst time of year. Both breeding parents in laying eggs at night in October, November. We don't know what other burrows have collapsed as well as the actual physical habitats that slid off the side of the mountain.
Mike Morrissey says it'll be many weeks before anyone can safely get into either colony to assess the real extent of the damage and discover how many birds have survived. Hutton's shearwaters aside, though, the wildlife of Kaikoura has come through remarkably well, and it'll be ready and waiting once the roads are open and tourists return to town. For Checkpoint, Alison Ballance.
Thank you for joining us, Alison. And speaking of joining us, David Crawford is joining us from Raleigh, I think they say in North Carolina, Raleigh or Raleigh, via shortwave. It's lovely to have you with us too, David. When you've lost your home or it's seriously damaged, and when your community has lost much of its income, much of its CBD and many of its services, life can go into a bit of a strange holding pattern. People in the red zone areas of Christchurch certainly understand that. And Cam Booker understands it. Cam and two mates set up the Mount Pleasant Farmers Market in Christchurch 10 days after the 2011 earthquake. An escape from people, it's still going. An escape for people, it's still going. So Cam decided Kaikoura needed a farmers market too, and today he made it happen. But the problem was getting the produce in.
We brought a convoy of one of my wee trucks in through State Highway 1 up to Oraro, and then we had a couple of four-wheel drives coming in, as well as support vehicles and one-ton inflatable boat that we needed to use to get it out to the shore to Anton's Rodfather's fishing charters boat.
So part roads, part overland as far as you could go basically, and then you had to put all the produce on the water and bring it in that way, did you?
Yeah, we transferred it to an inflatable and then ferried it out to a fishing charter boat.
Which is a hell of an effort to go to. What have you brought in? What have you got to sell there this afternoon?
We brought in lettuces, tomatoes, asparagus, strawberries, red onions, cucumbers. What else have we got there? And also a load of fresh meat from Euro Gourmet Meats in Christchurch.
That was this morning. Now, we let Cam set up. The market gave him an hour to sell a few things, and then we phoned him back.
We had a massive crowd here arriving at 12 o'clock, and just everything in terms of the meat and the vegetables is about sold out now.
And people must have been delighted to see you, were they, Cam?
Yeah, no, it was great. So I think we're going to have to work on maybe trying to get up another run in a couple of days.
Wait a sec, it's 1 minute past one, so you've basically sold out in 61 minutes.
Yeah, pretty much. We've got lettuces and red onions left.
Kim, why did you do this? What was it that made you want to do this?
Well, we do farmers markets every week in Christchurch. We started one in Mount Pleasant after the Quake, and access to fresh fruit and vegetables, especially in this scenario, is pretty difficult. There's nothing in the supermarket, and it's also about building the market and getting local people to buy local. And like, if we've got a range of fruit and veggies up here, then you've got something to establish the market so the local traders can turn up and it gets the people here as well, so everyone benefits.
Also, when times are tough, right? You know, when you're up against it, the joy of just being able to go and buy something fresh and delicious is pretty great, isn't it?
Yeah, it's good. I mean, in terms of us selling for stuff, by the time we organise and get stuff and like we reduce prices and that to get up, it's not about the money for us. It'll be a whole lot easier for us to do it at home, especially the challenges we had in getting here.
Yeah. Cam, are there any customers nearby? Is there anyone left? Is there anybody standing there looking very happy as they hold their lettuce or their sausages or something? Can you see anyone?
Yes. I'll hand you over to Janine.
Thank you, Cam.
Hey, John, it's Janine here.
Janine, it's lovely to talk to you. We're recording you for Radio New Zealand, so there are a number of words you can't say.
Oh, okay. I'll try and behave myself.
Okay, you and me both. Hey, so what have you bought, Janine?
I have bought lettuces, and tomatoes, asparagus, carrots, zucchini. So I'm well stocked with all those sorts of things. If you've been without, you sort of really crave for.
Yeah, fresh asparagus, new season asparagus. So
you can't beat it.
Oh, yum. So you haven't seen any fresh fruit and veggies for 9 days, probably, nothing.
No. It's so it's like a real luxury. And you should have seen the number of people here. It's amazing. Everybody came together and it's actually been a bit of a social occasion too.
Just to catch up.
Everyone's come out of the woodwork.
Yeah, literally and metaphorically, I suspect. There will have been some people who've come out of some fairly damaged woodwork. What sort of nicks your house in?
Well, I'm really lucky actually. Our home, we're up on the peninsula and we're on limestone, so we had very minimal damage. So I feel quite safe up there. But our business suffered quite severely, but yeah.
What's your business, Janine?
We've got the Kaikoura hunting and fishing store.
Oh, man.
Yeah, so that's and we were actually last Monday we were moving into a brand new building on last Monday.
You were not. So you were going to open a new premises for the summer season?
Yes, yep. We're all ready to roll. So it's yellow ticket at the moment. So we're just really waiting for the engineers' reports and getting that, and then we know where we stand, which direction we're going to go, and make plans from there.
But I guess the thing you need more than anything else is customers, right?
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. I mean, if we are okay to go ahead once the building's fixed and we open, we've got a brand new building, bigger overhead, and no customers. So that's going to create a bit of, a few wee issues for us.
A few wee issues. That's
quite a few.
Yeah, not that wee, but I guess you feel like everyone's in the same boat, right? And so what? Oh,
everybody's affected. So everyone in this town, some way or other. With the lack of people coming here. So, one way or another, someone's affected.
Janine Sanford, who is a retailer in Kaikoura, also has some boats that she takes people out fishing on. She can't do any of that at the moment. Let's leave Kaikoura and the earthquake zone to end the program with tonight. Business is fearful the US decision to quit the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, may eventually trigger a global trade war. They're afraid the incoming administration of Donald Trump will lurch into economic protectionism, and that will harm New Zealand trade. Our economics correspondent Patrick O'Mara reports on this.
After 6 long years of painstaking negotiation behind closed doors, the US President-elect Donald Trump took less than 3 minutes in his first edict to kill the TPP off. The Executive Director of the International Business Forum, Stephen Jacoby, is rueing what he calls a missed opportunity.
A huge disappointment to learn that TPP is not going to go forward as we had envisaged. Short of trying cryogenics, I'm not sure what we can do at this point.
The TPP's demise already carries some bite. The Special Agricultural Trade Envoy, Mike Peterson, points out that meat processors are at a disadvantage in the Japanese market, with their Australian rivals already enjoying lower tariffs.
Australia have effectively almost an 18% tariff advantage for beef exports into Japan at the moment. And that advantage holds over not just New Zealand, of course, but also the US and Canada. So they have a big advantage, and it's really hurting us in that market.
The government is consoling itself by pointing out New Zealand has plenty of irons in the trade fire, including the Asia-focused Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP, as well as potential deals with the European Union and the Middle East. But it's the US and Japan, the world's biggest and third biggest economies, the Prime Minister John Key is after. Mike Peterson says New Zealand gambled by putting all its eggs in the TPP basket in a bid to effectively secure trade deals with the US and Japan, and lost.
We don't have the sway to be able to negotiate easily bilateral agreements with either Japan or the US on our own. It's why we entered TPP, it's why we started it.
The International Business Forum, Stephen Jacoby, fears the US President-elect Donald Trump will go even further and slap high tariffs on goods from Mexico and China. He says they are both important markets for New Zealand firms, and the rise of economic protectionism is a very real and daunting prospect.
A world without rules and a proper framework is an unsafe and insecure world for New Zealand, and there are risks to our business coming up already.
But if business is feeling bereft, TPP opponents are celebrating. Not that they're hanging pictures of Donald Trump on their walls in thanks. The Green Party MP and TPP opponent Barry Coates says public awareness doomed TPP, not the maverick billionaire.
Governments lost the confidence of the public in these agreements that they were negotiating, and we think that means there needs to be a change in the kind of trade rules that we develop.
And a prominent TPP critic, Auckland law professor Jane Kelsey, warns the battle is not over. Professor Kelsey says many of the other deals out there, such as RCEP, are based on the same model that enriches corporates at the expense of the public.
There hasn't been so much attention paid to other negotiations, such as the China-led RCEP or the secretive negotiations for a trade and services agreement in Geneva. And so there is a lot more work that needs to be done so people can start to understand the links between all of these mega deals.
Professor Kelsey says it's time for TPP cheerleaders to realise the tide has turned and people want deals that allow governments to deal with issues like climate change and inequality. For Checkpoint, Patrick Amara.
Thank you, Patrick, and thank you everyone for being with us tonight. There's 10 seconds before the end of the program. On behalf of our really tremendous team and all our fantastic reporters out in the field, we will be back tomorrow night. Thank you for listening to Checkpoint.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. 35 properties have been evacuated in the community of Goose Bay, just south of Kaikoura, because of fears a dam created by a quake slip will collapse. The owner of a Quake-wrecked office block in Wellington says he received no explanation from the City Council for its decision to assume control of the building's demolition. The Insurance Council says a failure to comply with the earthquake rules around restraints for office equipment is a likely cause of some of the damage to commercial buildings in the capital. WorkSafe has declined an application by families for a stay in sealing the Pike River mine. Temperatures set records across eastern New Zealand today as a high-pressure system and a warm air mass combined to create sweltering conditions. And 2 men who died while tramping in the Tararua Forest Park were originally from